Hey, what's going on, guys? Max here with Because Bitcoin, and today we are going to be diving into the highly anticipated Bitcoin Death Cross. For those that are not familiar with what the Death Cross is, the name is very daunting, perhaps a little bit dramatic, if I might. But basically, the Death Cross is just two high time frame moving averages crossing over each other. Specifically, this Death Cross will be examining today is the 200 SMA on the daily time frame and the 50 SMA also on the daily time frame. And we're going to take a look back on what has happened historically when they've crossed and what we could potentially prospect out happening in the very near future. So let's not waste any time. We'll dive right into the charts and discuss potentially what is to come. So you'll see up here, this is on the 2-day chart. I have the moving averages locked on the daily time frame. So we go down to the 1 hour, you can still see they're on the daily time frame they're about to cross. We're on the daily, of course, it's perfect. We could even go higher. Again, they are locked. So if I bounce around time frames, just know that the moving averages are in fact locked. All right, so let's just take a look. Basically, this moving average right up here, this one that's blue, they both look a little bit blue actually. Let's just do this for the video. Let's make it orange so it's very clear. The 50 simple moving average is orange, and the 200 daily SMA is bluish purple, whatever color that is. So when they cross each other, really what this indicates is just momentum is basically falling off of a cliff. Okay, it's not anything definitive. Moving averages, some people like to use them as support and resistance. That's not truly how they're intended to be used. It's really just to identify where momentum is either picking up or falling off of a cliff. But look, I mean, if whatever works for you works for you. But let's talk about what a cross would imply, and let's go back and basically look at what's happened for previous crosses. So we're about to cross here. It's going to cross sometime next week. I'm making this video Sunday, September 10th. I'm guessing by end of day Tuesday, this should have crossed by now. But let's go back and look at some previous death crosses and see what's happened. So the last one that happened, again, I'll just go back here so you guys can see. We're about to cross here. The last death cross that's happened for Bitcoin was actually back up here, kind of right after our all-time high. This was right at the beginning of 2022. So we'll mark this out with a vertical line as well. You can see that basically right after we had this cross, it was pretty aggressive. Like we basically, within a very short period of time, sold off pretty aggressively. What's interesting is, right at the cross, I don't know if it's just that there's some algorithms that maybe kick in and like begin to market short, and there's a lot of slippage, and basically those initial, or I guess maybe late shorts kind of get squeezed out. But the initial knee-jerk reaction you'll see on a lot of these death crosses is not an immediate dump, but actually like a little mini squeeze right off of the death cross, and then we actually start moving down. All right, but sometimes it seems like the initial knee-jerk reaction is the opposite of what you'd actually anticipate. So look, ignoring sort of the lower time frame moves, after this death cross right here, we ended up within basically let's see, how many days was this? This was this was less than 2 weeks. This was 10 days. We did dump on the last death cross 23% in roughly a couple weeks, a little bit less, and we did recover a bit. But again, this death cross is really more so to indicate that momentum is dying and there's been a shift in trend. So I wouldn't necessarily expect or play for an immediate drop, but here's the last one that happened. We had a pretty aggressive drop following this death cross. Let's go back and take a look at another one. So this one happened after the first top of the subsequent double top in Bitcoin's last bull market. So this double cross happened right here, basically June 19th. We can go down to the lower time frame and make sure. Yep, right here. So this one happened June 19th. And you can see that similarly to the last one, after we got the cross, we did have a pretty aggressive drop. All right, so looks like the open of this candle was here. Within the few days following, we did drop 20%. So it looks like that's about 3 days-ish. We did have a 20% drop. So again, another pretty aggressive drop. It didn't happen immediately. It's not like we get the cross and then suddenly, we just immediately drop. But you can see that typically when momentum is falling off of a cliff like this, you can get some pretty nasty drops. Now let's go back actually before before the most recent bull market and take a look at what's happened, because there have been some outliers as well. Some pretty notable price action. And here we'll go to the daily time frame for this one. Something interesting about this, the next death cross. I mean, I guess we could talk about this one. I don't really like this one because we had the COVID drop, which in my opinion was a bit of a statistical outlier. We can mark it for sure. I mean, it was a true death cross, right? But it's a weird one. It's definitely weird. So we won't spend a lot of time on it. For this one, we did have a little drop after this death cross, another 13, 14%. But let's move on to this one. This one is very interesting in my opinion. And this is actually where I think we could potentially be right now. It's not going to be exactly like this, okay? But this price action for, somewhere in 2019 seems very comparable. So we had a death cross right here. And you could probably move it to the one candle before, actually. Let's move it right here. So upon this death cross, when we had the 50 SMA crossing the 200 SMA, both on the daily time frames, we actually had a pretty aggressive squeeze. Now, it really depends. I'll see if I can go down to the lower time frames here, because it depends how you want to mark this down. Let's see here. Yeah, it depends where you want to mark the death cross from. We could technically mark it here. This is on the 4-hour. It doesn't print perfectly. But if you went to the daily time frame, it would appear as though, we did have a little bit of a pump. And it would actually appear as though the cross happened on this candle. And we actually, from right here, this close, ended up basically rocketing up 21% and then subsequently bleeding very, very aggressively. Now, of course, this is very short-term price action. Like, this was the 1 day following. The pump right up here was 1 day following this death cross, depending on how you want to mark it up. But of course, then the following month after, we did bleed almost 40% from the high of that little squeeze. So we'll see. I mean, again, it's another pretty a pretty reliable death cross where even if we just mark and we ignore the squeeze, let's just ignore this little squeeze that happened. We mark from the actual death cross to about 30 days out. You can see that it was another pretty reliable month-long bleed, as momentum basically just fell off of a cliff. So it falls in line pretty much perfectly with, again, this one, which I don't love because it was a weird time for sure with the black swan, but we'll count it. From the death cross itself here, 27%. This one's almost 14%. This one after the Wyckoff distribution was almost 20%. This, I guess, right after the all-time high was minus 24%. And we're about to get one right here. And I will say momentum certainly looks bleak. It definitely looks a little bit weak. So let's go back. Let's see if there's another decent one here. So here's another really solid death cross. So this one happened a long time ago. So at this time, Bitcoin was, just finished basically like a cyclical blow off top, went pretty crazy. And you can see that we actually really started dumping before this death cross. We had been bleeding, pretty aggressively into the cross. As you can see from the previous high here, the all-time high at the time, to the death cross, we'll just mark it to, even when it happened, it had already bled 65%. So different time for Bitcoin for sure. That's a pretty aggressive bleed, but you can see upon this death cross, most of the downside had already happened. The day that the death cross happened, from the opening price and then I guess to the low of like the following days, we did dip another 10%. But you can see pretty quickly following that, we had a really, really solid recovery. Within the 30 days following, we rocketed up 50%. So, if you are bullish here or you're thinking that the worst is probably behind us, you could probably lean on this as an example and say, well, we already had a nice flush off the highs. I don't really expect too much more. Look, I think that what we could expect upon this death cross is something like this. Most of the bleed has already happened, or it's signifying a loss of momentum. Momentum is dwindling, and we're actually closer to a bottom and maybe a big bounce into then a lower high, and you could expect some upside here. But again, for the sake of keeping things consistent, upon the day of the death cross, to the subsequent low to follow in the immediate days, up to maybe a month after, we did bleed another 10%. So I don't want to go back too much further than this, because now we're talking about Bitcoin being like, a couple $100. And I do think that the asset class has matured to a degree where some of that price action can become a little bit stale or irrelevant. So anyways, let's talk about what could potentially happen here in the near future. So I would argue that we are going to get some more downside, not necessarily just because of the death cross. Again, the death cross to me is it's a lagging indicator that's indicating momentum has been dwindling and falling off of a cliff. And this up here has more or less been distribution. And after distribution, you could expect these higher time frame moving averages to, of course, begin to roll over and potentially cross each other. As we begin to roll over and price begins to slide. So it's lagging. For those of us that have been trading this thing on a daily basis, we've been adamant that price has been basically about to drop. Momentum has been dead. Conditions are not dictating higher prices all the way since we were up here. Up here, I was, up here we were very short as well. So it's, for those of us that are very, very tuned into the market, day traders trading on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, very, very in tune with it. You don't need the death cross to indicate to you what you've known basically since since April. Okay, that up here, this was going to get sold off. The signs were there, but we are seeing it reflected in some of these higher time frame lagging, moving averages. So I am expecting more downside. Perhaps on the day of the cross, which I would anticipate to be pretty early next week, you might get some algos just immediately market selling because they know that historically, look at the past crosses. Upon this one, we had a over 20% drop, about a 20% drop on this one, and going back 14% on that cross, on this cross, excluding the little spike. We still had a pretty nasty, really nasty sell-off. The spike almost made things worse. It's like it trapped more longs, enabled more liquidations to be tagged. Maybe some longs got trapped up there on perps, and it actually made the sell-off worse. So again, maybe we'll see a knee-jerk reaction on the actual day of the cross, which should be early next week. I'm going to try to get this video out as soon as possible, but something to definitely keep an eye on. Where would I potentially be targeting? It's a very... I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear this, but this is a level that I'm very interested in right down here, right? Somewhere in this box, 21K-ish. The reason being is we actually have a Bitcoin CME Futures Gap right down here that's completely unmitigated. So I think that this level should probably get tagged sooner rather than later. And I don't know if we'll get there on like one clean swoop, one clean drop or something like that. It could take a long time, or maybe it happens quickly, but I am definitely interested in this area right here. There's some other confluence that I've talked about, on my Twitter and in Spaces and on our daily YouTube show Market Check, Monday through Friday. So there's some VWAPs down there, and again, some order blocks and inefficiencies that I think it would be useful to tag. So I definitely am interested in doing business down in that area. I don't really love this trend line, but it's one that at least I think is potentially relevant. Something like this. We had some really nice interaction with this weird trend line. I mean, this is, big deviation potentially, but it wouldn't surprise me to see something like this, that we talk about moving up. But anyways, that's, I don't live and die by diagonal trend lines. I think that they're a little bit subjective, and I prefer the horizontals, truthfully. But anyways, this is definitely a level that I would keep an eye out for right around here. Just you can maybe mark out this March low. But I do think in the short term we could have a more immediate bounce somewhere around here. Not this line. This is here to indicate what I think could potentially happen. So if we get the death cross, maybe we finally lose 25K, which is in my opinion the most important level on the chart. I could see 23 providing a certain degree of support. But then the issue is you come back up and you've now been accepted back into the previous range, or you've lost that 25K SR level. And I would expect it to act as sort of a sticky rejection spot. And then after that bounce, I would potentially expect around 20K to get retest. And then from there, we will reassess and evaluate where we potentially are. But once this 25K level, I mean, this is potentially, you know, once you lose this level again, and we've just been sitting here for so long, once you lose this level, that's why I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit too in front of this thing, where some people are confident 25K holds. Okay, I can understand that. You technically are at support. But a lot of people are expecting to be able to bid like 22 to 24, and they're thinking that that's going to be the final dip going into the Bitcoin halving. They think that like that's it, this is your final flush, it's all good after that. But they fail to, acknowledge what happens if we, I mean, this is such a key level. I mean, what if we're back underneath this? This was range high, breakout, retest. Now we're back here again. If we get acceptance back into this range, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but your range low is, here. Best case. Worst case, this is your range low. We'll talk about this later, but we'll go here first. You lose this level up here, there's a lot of air beneath you. There's definitely a lot of air beneath you. So everybody should have 25K marked out on their chart. And I just wouldn't be overly eager to bid necessarily lower. I think if you're a day trader, go for it. This level right here, in my opinion, is likely to give some degree of a bounce. And another reason why I say that too is there's a really, really nice and clean 3-day order block right here. I could see, maybe this goes lower, right? Like we bounce off of this order block, then we come back up, retest the underside of these wicks, and then we roll back over. But you lose 25K, that's tough. That's a big level that you're losing there. So to be fully transparent, I am in some shorts. I'm not actually shorting Bitcoin here. I'm not so focused on shorting Bitcoin. I'm more so focused on shorting altcoins because I think that Bitcoin dominance is going to spike up like crazy. I think we'll see Bitcoin dominance moving towards 55, 58, maybe 60%. And if that happens, I think it implies a lot of your centralized alts, Matic, Solanas, maybe even BNB. The list goes on forever. Really, every alt on like the top 20 should essentially bleed back into Bitcoin. That would be my expectation here. So anyways, that was just a quick rundown, what I'm looking for. We do have the Death Cross coming up in just a couple days. So definitely something to be aware of given what's happened previously. Basically every example that we went over today painted a pretty grueling picture, hence maybe why the name, the Death Cross. It's still a little bit dramatic. Death implies it's completely over, but look, it's a lagging indicator that's again tipping its hat to momentum has been dwindling for a long time, and we're probably due for a little bit deeper of a correction, because once momentum turns around on a higher time frame, it's not like a speedboat or a jet ski that can turn and pivot very quickly. It's like a big naval ship. It takes a really long time to slowly move that boat around, and that's momentum on the higher time frames. It's very rare to see a V top or a V bottom, in weird circumstances like COVID. I suppose you can see them when markets are highly manipulated and basically engineered to go up with QE and low interest rates. But, when the market's trading freely, like I do believe it is right now, and momentum begins to really turn around and dwindle like this, it can be pretty dark. So just don't be eager to knife catch. Take things slow. You want to buy an asset when you believe it has the greatest probability of going up after you purchase it. Not just because you think you bought the bottom. You could buy the bottom and you still might have to wait 2 years to make a 2x on your money or something like that. So it's more of a time thing than a price thing. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in again. My name is Max. I'm the CEO of Because Bitcoin. If you enjoyed this video and you want a more intimate look on how I trade and my team trades, please consider checking out some of the links in the bio to our premium offerings. We have a really kick-ass Discord. I share all of my positions in real time and additional analysis that I save just for the Discord in there. We also have 2 private daily calls in that Discord, so it's about an extra hour and a half a day almost. But for me, the entire Because Bitcoin team, we get to talk to each other, ask questions, hang out, stuff like that. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.